Hello and welcome. I'm Tefera Gedamu. Building U.S.-Ethiopian university partnerships. That was the theme for a conference that brought together several Ethiopian and American universities this week. And my guest today, Dr. Allan Goodman, is the president and CEO of the Institute of International Education. A very warm welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here. This is my first visit to Ethiopia and therefore very special.
Your institution was founded nearly a century ago by Nobel laureates and such. And the vision, the mission, I think, is to kind of create mutual understanding. Do you think you've succeeded in doing that, considering the fact that America is a superpower? It has been a superpower, it still is.
When we were founded, America was really not a superpower, and most Americans did not think about living or studying in a country or a culture beyond our own. So the two winners of the Nobel Peace Prize that founded us really believed that we ought to experience other cultures, we ought to experience other people, and we ought to know ourselves by living in other places. And over the years, we've helped nearly 500,000 people study, do research, travel for academic purposes in a culture beyond their own. And we think that that has created friendships, it's averted conflicts, it has made scientific progress possible, and so mutual understanding is very important to our mission.
But wasn't it all about selling America, though? I mean, you had many students through the programs that you've developed over the years come and study in America, visit America, and all that stuff. Wasn't it all about selling America?
It was really all about peace. Our founders were profoundly affected by World War I, and they felt that if we knew each other better, if people in Europe and studied in each other's countries, let alone in America, maybe conflict would have or could have been averted. So their objective was part of a world peace movement, and it continues to be our objective. We think that international education is the best investment you can make in making the world less dangerous.
Can you be more specific? I mean, this programs that you've developed is a means to achieving peace? Is that what he's saying?
I think education is always a means for achieving peace, but knowing yourself in another environment is also really important. Many years ago, a young Egyptian on a Department of State program came to visit America. And at the end of his visit, he had an audience with President Johnson, who was the president at the time, and said he was very afraid of coming to America. His skin was very dark. He was of the Muslim faith. He had never been to America. And he said, after my time in America, I realized we shared many common values, that there was freedom of religion, that I was respected. And President Johnson asked him what his name was, and he said, my name is Anwar Sadat. And sometimes that educational experience, that visit in another country, plants a seed for peace that grows up to be the peace between Egypt and Israel today.
Right, but are you talking about bits and pieces here and there? It's not comprehensive, is it? I mean, just bringing over to the U.S. people from other countries, from Western Europe, from Asia, Latin America, Africa. I mean, you think this is a way of creating a solid foundation for achieving those objectives that you've just mentioned, in particular peace?
Well,
because, I mean, we are talking about isolated things here.
Well, 500,000 people now through our institute have experienced peace. They have developed discoveries in medicine and science that have won 12 Nobel Prizes. They have been leaders of their country, and when they've had an opportunity to avert conflict, that they have. So I don't mind the piece by piece or the seed planting process, because you never know who will turn out to be a Sadat. You'll never know who will turn out to be a young scientist that cures cancer. You never know who will turn out to be a president of a country that will say, we don't have to go to war. We don't have to settle this by conflict. So peace building sometimes is piece by piece.
So you're basically saying that it's all about creating leaders.
It's really creating about mutual understanding. We inhabit this planet, we share a world, but we're divided into nations. And nations have boundaries, and what's important is to understand what's beyond the boundaries. So education is the best way to affect people when they're young. We know that. Everybody wants an education. That's very valuable to your future. It's also valuable to the future of the world because you never know who you educate today is going to save your life tomorrow.
So it's all about spreading values as well, right? Western values.
You and I both want the same things for our children. We'd like them to have a healthy life. We'd like them to have a job. We'd like them to have education. We'd like them not to be attacked. If we have daughters, we want them to be free of violence. I don't think those are Western values. I think they're values that everyone shares. We all have a common ancestor. She walked the earth in this country 3 million years ago. So I see our work as not promoting the values of any particular civilization or society, but human values. And human values enable us to give a better life to our children wherever they live and whatever their color.
Have you redefined your objectives after 9/11, for example? Because the world seems to be a little bit more divided than it was before that, along several lines.
It made our work more important. The reaction of many after 9/11 was we need to reach out to and better understand, for example, the Muslim world. Now, the chairman of our institute lost his son in the World Trade Towers on 9/11, and they, in fact, never recovered his body. It was such a terrible disaster. And his family decided to create a memorial fund, a scholarship fund at the institution he went to. And maybe 3 weeks after 9/11, he called me and said, "What do you think we should do with this fund?" And remembering that his son had traveled to Egypt, he may have traveled to Ethiopia, he traveled in the Muslim part of the world, I said, why don't you create a scholarship that enables American students to travel in the places that your son did? And he said, no, I think what we're going to do is create a fund that enables people from Muslim countries to come to America so they understand we do not hate them and we do not hold them responsible for 9/11.
Did it work?
And it works every day because America now has had more students and scholars from the Muslim world than ever before. And we've had more Americans studying in the Middle East, North Africa than ever before. I think motivated by 9/11 to understand each other better, not to impose one value over another, and for us to demonstrate to the world that what happened on 9/11 was not the product of a religion, it was not the product of a civilization, it was an act of terrorism, and we don't hold whole civilizations or whole religions accountable for that.
So who comes to, I mean, there have been something like 26,000 plus students, scholars who visited the United States this past year.
Well, altogether, there are nearly 700,000 that are studying in the United States now. About 200,000 are coming for the first time. And what amazes me about this is that people, students from every single country, every culture, every religion can find a place to study in our country. They're welcome. So we have students from countries with whom America doesn't have diplomatic relations. But the education space is the place where you plant seeds for the future of things like diplomatic relations.
So how many countries are covered?
Every sovereign state in the world has a student or a scholar today in the United States studying science or history or business, and we welcome that.
These are also undergraduate students, right?
About half are undergraduate, about half are graduate. And maybe 10 years ago, most students coming to the United States were at the graduate level. So there's really been quite a widening of access and big increases in undergraduates, for example, coming to America from China.
There are several Chinese students in the U.S. actually topping the list as far as foreign students in the U.S. are concerned. That's handled by your institution, right?
There's about 128,000 Chinese now studying in the United States. There was a big increase last year. Usually India and China are number one and number two. Many countries from Asia also send their students. So the top 10, maybe half, are from Asia, Southeast Asia. But there's great interest on China's part in studying in America, now at the undergraduate level. And we have great interest in having them. We really believe that this is how you get to understand each other.
What do they take home? Have you talked to some of them? I mean, I understand that you were the first American professor to lecture at the Foreign Affairs College in Beijing.
They take a lot home, not because there's a program to give them a set of values, but some take home values in their personal life, equality between men and women, for example. Some take home the image that you can have religion in society, and yet it doesn't have to shape politics. They all take home an education that usually is very practical, science, business, management, because they're getting the education abroad to respond to needs back home. So maybe one of the values embedded in all of this is that education is something you gain to bring back to your home society, to make it different, to make it better. And I think it's much too early to tell how that's going to play out in China or how it will play out in India or any other country where there's substantial exchange.
There are also several U.S. citizens, Americans, studying in China, right? It's increasing by the day.
It's grown a lot. In the past decade, maybe at the beginning, we had 2,000 Americans studying in China. Now it's close to 15,000. I think the Beijing Olympics had a great deal to do with Americans saying, I've heard a lot about China. China's growing as a world power. It would be important to know something about China. And when they saw the Olympics, that began to make the numbers really go up. I think we'll see in a few years a lot of people studying in Brazil because the impact of Brazil hosting the Olympics. That does tend to make a difference.
You are in Ethiopia, and basically your institute are organized in collaboration with the Ethiopian Ministry of Education, I bet, and other higher institutions of learning. It's about building sustainable U.S.-Ethiopian university partnerships. And what is that you want to achieve?
Well, we'd like to see the numbers of students studying in each other's countries substantially increase. And we'd also like to see students that study in each other's countries, when they're finished, return home. One way to help promote that process is for institutions to have deep partnerships with each other, whether it's motivated by research or simply the fact that, for example, Americans really need to know something about Africa. This is a place where civilization may have begun. Not a bad place to study. So we're really trying to encourage through institutional partnerships a deepening and a substantial increase both ways. In the past decade and in the past century, international exchange was student by student or faculty member by faculty member. It was one-on-one, one-for-one. And that's not going to be enough to sustain partnerships in the future. That's why institutions have to buy into each other.
This week, and my guest today, Dr. Allan Goodman, is the president and CEO of the Institute of International Education. A very warm welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here. This is my first visit to Ethiopia and therefore very special.
Your institution was founded nearly a century ago by Nobel laureates and such. And the vision, the mission, I think, is to kind of create mutual understanding. Do you think you've succeeded in doing that, considering the fact that America is a superpower? It has been a superpower, it still is.
When we were founded, America was really not a superpower, and most Americans did not think about living or studying in a country or a culture beyond our own. So the two winners of the Nobel Peace Prize that founded us really believed that we ought to experience other cultures, we ought to experience other people, and we ought
Hello and welcome. I'm Tefera Gedamu. Building U.S.-Ethiopian university partnerships. That was the theme for a conference that brought together several Ethiopian and American universities.
To know ourselves by living in other places. And over the years, we've helped nearly 500,000 people study, do research, travel for academic purposes in a culture beyond their own. And we think that that has created friendships, it's averted conflicts, it has made scientific progress possible, and so mutual understanding is very important to our mission.
But wasn't it all about selling America, though? I mean, you had many students through the programs that you've developed over the years come and study in America, visit America, and all that stuff. Wasn't it all about selling America?
It was really all about peace. Our founders were profoundly affected by World War I, and they felt that if we knew each other better, if people in Europe and studied in each other's countries, let alone in America, maybe